Hey friends, welcome back to our videos about UU practices at home. We are we are well into the practice of virtual worship with all of its benefits and its challenges, and we've been thinking about what worship and religious education at home is like for us, and just trying to think about what it might be like for you all.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been talking about this a lot this year, especially Nico. I think you and I have had this conversation a lot, and I use this analogy all the time of the dinner table, and thinking about how all ages can be engaged in worship. And one of the experiences I had growing up a lot is that there were some times when my family would get together where the kids would have to like sit at the kids' table, and I did not often like that. My favorite experiences were when I was invited to sit with the adults at the adult table and listen and engage in all of the conversations that they were having. And my experience of those conversations, of course, were different at like 7 years old, and then different at like 14 years old, and at like 25. You would learn to engage on different levels, but being invited into those conversations were really important. I'm sure when I was little, I was probably like super squirmy and not terribly engaged. I probably didn't understand half the things that were being said, but the fact that I was able to be there was like so important to me. And I could tell, I knew from an early age that dinner time conversations about all kinds of topics, politics, religion, whatever, I knew that that was a value that my family held. Um, so yeah, I think about that a lot. That often I think our temptation is we say our kids aren't going to understand what it is that we're doing here. And so we're going to send them over to the kids' table. Not that there isn't value to the experience of being with your peers. Of course there is. But we forget sometimes that there's value to inviting the kids to sit with the adults sometimes too.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's making me think too of just the different experiences we have of pretty much everything, and how so many times I would listen to church service and then talk about it afterwards with someone else, and we would have completely different impressions or lessons learned from it, even though we heard the exact same thing. And I think that's true for all ages, and like you were saying, even a 4 or 5 year old who's sitting in the sanctuary and experiencing the church service, from the outside, they're going to appear like they're experiencing something completely different from everyone else. And maybe what they take away from that is just this feeling of belonging and of community, or of that value that their family has of going to church on Sunday. They'll understand that that's important. And then, you ask different people about their experience in church. Maybe they love the hymns. Maybe they took a lesson from the sermon. Maybe it was just like the first time they got to sit down and look out the window and take a breath. But all of those things are so important. All of those different experiences of the exact same thing.
Yeah. I think too, like I've been part of, lots of different conversations about what truly multi-generational worship
Mhm.
looks like. And I think one of the traps we get caught in often is that I think as parents and as staff, is that we have this idea that kids must be actively engaged the entire time in order for it to be a kid-friendly service, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think, like the dinner table example, worship for all of us, no matter what your age is, there are active parts where we're actively engaged, like maybe when we're singing a hymn or doing responsive reading, or if we have a moment to have conversation with people around us, whatever it is. There are times when we are sometimes actively engaged, but often it's passive, right? We're listening, or we're experiencing, just being in that space together or apart over Zoom, whatever it is. There's a lot of passive experience that happens in church, no matter where we are. And I think we take kids' squirminess, maybe they're crawling under the pews and playing or coloring or whatever. I think we assume that kids aren't gaining anything from that experience in those moments where they're, doing something else, but maybe they're listening. They're still watching everybody in the room. They're still really gaining something from those experiences. And I think it's important to not forget that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's multiple kinds of input, which we all benefit from having sometimes those really, you know, your brain has to be turned on and focused, and sometimes you can just be kind of the recipient. And similarly, I've been wondering how many of our adults are at home watching virtual service and squirming around, or laying on the floor with their laptop, or right, have your foot tucked under you when you're sitting on the couch, and things that maybe we're not really doing when we're sitting in the sanctuary, and finding it comforting and finding it really nice, and then recognizing too that watching service in pajamas is not it's not bad. You can still find, the holy and the sacred in that space. It's not it's not irreverent to do things that feel good, that feel right, that help make the space more accessible, really, for yourself. And why would we have a different expectation for our kids than we're finding is true for ourselves?
Yeah. We use the word posture a lot, right? Like finding a reverent posture in worship can look like coloring if you're bringing reverence with you into the space. I know people who look like they're maybe like they're paying attention, they're engaged, but are completely irreverent. Maybe the spirit that they brought into the space is one of like criticism, don't want to be there, whatever, and maybe they appear to be actively engaged. So that appearance of whatever we think active engagement looks like doesn't necessarily tell us a whole lot. And I think, we all have a role to play in sort of modeling what that posture of reverence is like, right? Worship is about worthship, holding what is worthy to us. And if we come into this space knowing that we have people of all ages, right? We are welcoming everybody into this space and we're going to all hold it together. That helps take so much stress off of parents who are worried about, their kids maybe being a little too noisy or something like that. That is a really stressful thing sometimes for parents. I don't want to minimize that at all. And I think we can do so much to relieve that by just understanding that our work is like we're modeling reverence here. We're modeling, even if you don't know the kids sitting next to you in the pew, they're watching you, right? We're learning, all of us are learning about what it means to worship together anytime we're together. This is a journey for all ages. We're all learning about it together.
Yeah, it's a different form of religious education in the sanctuary, and it's learning that reverence can mean a wide variety of things. It's witnessing adults mess up. It's witnessing adults hold space for one another, and be forgiving of one another. And so staying in the sanctuary, kind of like sitting at the grown-ups table at family gatherings, has so much value, as does going back to RE, sitting at the kids' table. And there's no really, right or wrong way to do it, because all of it has value, and all of it is faith development. It's learning from one another. It's learning from the community.
Yeah, I think so often we forget to ask questions. Like we've answered them, but we forget to ask those actual questions. Like we don't often ask the question, who is worship for, right? I think our assumption is worship is for adults and religious education is for kids. So we've answered the questions, who is worship for, who is RE for, without really thinking it through, when in fact we know that worship is about a community of all ages, right? It's about holding what is of worth to us. And that is something, often we have to do together as a whole community. And religious education is for everyone too. There is value to having small groups split up by age sometimes, which is often what happens in religious education classes. There are different ways, as you said, different ways of learning, different ways of progressing along our faith development journey. It's important to remember that we're all doing this work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with all those different journeys and ways of being and types of wiggling in mind, we'd love for you all to share with us about your home worship experiences. You can send an email or write a comment, but please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.